Go Geronimo, and you're watching the 7th video on how to make a red oak longbow. We're going to be working the riser and the tips. So we're going to be cutting out the arrow shelf, working the handle, and shaping the tips on this video. The biggest important part of this build is the arrow rest. Everything else, pretty cosmetic. So, alright, let's get to it. Alright, so we've tillered out the bow. Okay, we worked on the limbs, we've tillered it out. It's 28 inches, 48.9 pounds, I think is what we're at of this bow. And now we're going to cut the arrow rest out and start working on the handle. Okay, so what I did first is draw a line through the center of the bow this direction, a line through the center of the bow this direction. I take a 1/4 inch to this direction and draw a line. Take another inch this direction, draw a line, make a box with those 2 points. Okay. Now here's my corner of where my arrow rest is going to start. All right. And now here's the corner of this handle where before it starts tapering off into the bow limb. I usually take another 1/4 inch to the right here, and then I start drawing my taper from this point to this point, just like that, nice and eyeballed. We're going to shape that with files and whatnot. It doesn't have to be perfect yet. And remember, when you're working with wood, if you can always take away, but you cannot add wood to your bow. So when I'm cutting this portion out, I'm going to make sure that I stay away from these lines, and gives me a buffer. You know, I can work back into the line instead of, you know, screwing up and cutting too much out. Now, the reason why I went 1/4 away from this center instead of cutting all the way to the center or even past the center like you usually see if you bought a fiberglass recurve or something like that, they will usually cut past the center, usually half the diameter of an arrow, so that the arrow can sit straight in the middle of the arrow rest. You can't do that with these because these are red oak and these are not as strong as fiberglass reinforced bows are. So we actually move this direction, giving ourselves a lot of wood to keep the structure of the bow and it not breaking. So that's why we did it this way. Also, I moved the arrow rest an inch up because I like to put my hand in the middle of the bow. I just feel like it's my preference. I don't know if it's the way it should be or not, but that's my preference because I believe that if I'm pushing at the middle of the bow and pulling the string somewhere in the middle of the string, then I am bending both limbs equally. Okay, so that's why I did that. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and cut off the shelf for the arrow rest. Be careful while you're doing this. In this portion I'm going to use my jigsaw. Now that we've got our arrow shelf cut out, we need to round the ledge off. Right now it's flat, okay, just like this. Just a straight line across. But we want to round it off so the tip, or not the tip, but the middle will be the area that the arrow is actually resting on. Okay, so less resistance. You're not gonna want it flat like this. It's gonna start ripping off your fletches. So it needs to be rounded off like this one. Okay, so I just take a file out of my woodworking bag here. See if I can find my 4-way. There it is. Just use my 4-way here. I'm going to take the rasp, the straight rasp portion. And just start rounding that corner round file. Work in there. Again with the 4-way. As you can see, we're starting to get a round shape on this arrow rest here, or the shelf. And that's what we want. Okay, so here we have a rear view of this bow. Okay, and here's the corner. It's sharp. You don't want it that way. We need to round this out. The reason for that is just like all the other things. Basically, everything's going to be rounded out by the end of this. You can strip fletches and all that kind of stuff. So you just take your circle file, if you have one, and just, make it round in there. Okay. Now you can just basically round all of this out. And in the front as well. Now we're going to be working on a pistol grip. I'm using a pistol grip on this one because whoever ends up with this bow, it'll work for them. Basically, a pistol grip is kind of a universal grip. It's going to fit basically anybody. And the way you do this is you start working out. When you work one side, you do the same amount. You take the same amount off of the other side. So you make it symmetrical. And then we're going to work our way inside here, and then work our way back out to this area, and you'll see what that looks like. You want to use if you're going to be using a 4-way like me, you want to use the round side with the rasp to work the heavy parts of this wood. Now, I have a Dremel. I don't use it for the most part until I get to the very end. Maybe I might use it. But I typically use hand tools because I trust them more, if that makes any sense to you. Every now and then I'm going to go ahead and stop and show you my progress. You see where we're starting here is up where the hand is going to be mostly at. Okay? That's where I'm going to have my hand at, my pointer finger, my thumb sitting right there. So I started taking the wood out there. Okay? And every now and then I'll just kind of stop and show you where I'm at. Show you again where I'm at. Right, so see how I'm working my best to keep both sides symmetrical. Whatever I take off of this side, I try to take off of this side, and I'm trying to go further and further in on this area. Not too far, but enough to contour your hand when you put it in there, okay? And you can use that as a judgment or a gauge. Just put your hand on it and see if it feels good. Okay. Now I'm going to start working in on the sides here. Both sides. We're actually going to round off some of the front too. Alright, so see how I've gotten some of this side worked out? And on this other side, it's the same thing, okay? Continue to do the same thing on one side as you did to the other. You can actually start to see how it's going to turn into a pistol grip here. Now I'm going to start rounding out some of the front here. You gotta be a little careful here, you don't want to go too far. But, you know, this isn't too bad of a thing because this is the structure that's the biggest. Since we put a block on there, this is going to be the strongest area. So I haven't had one break yet in the handle, so I would still use caution, but it'll be okay. Okay, you see the front here now. I rounded out some of the front. I never went all the way into the fiberglass in the front, but you can get pretty close. Alright, and again, both sides I've tried to stay equal or symmetrical. You gotta watch the front of this part. You don't want to get too far past the block, then, because you're starting to get into the actual working portion of this limb. You don't want to do that. Okay, so after I'm about this area here, I'm going to just start rounding off everything, okay? Leaving this area alone for now. Alright, starting to wind down on my battery over there. So, we'll get back to this, but I wanted to show you real quick. Basically, I'm just rounding everything off. I just left this back part off, but I'm going to round that too, okay? Now, what I'm doing right here is I'm making the rest of my handle slope towards the back. Alright, so I pretty much have my handle roughed out. Okay? That's pretty much what it's going to look like. You need some sandpaper and smooth it down and fix all of the imperfections. That's going to look pretty good, and it's going to feel good too.
Oh yeah.
Alright, at this point I'm sandpapering with 60 grain in the handle, making it all look nice. I'm not going to go over this, the limbs with the 60 grain. I'll probably start with a 100 or a 220. I don't want to take any wood, any more than necessary out of the limbs at this point, because that'll weaken the bow. It's really starting to come together, isn't it? Isn't it?